Sunlight strikes the white limestone of the temple courtyard in Jerusalem. The air is thick, almost difficult to breathe, heavy with the sharp smell of roasting lamb. Most people assume this word is just a musical notation, a meaningless stage direction meant for an ancient choir director who died 3 millennia ago. The rapid-fire hum of someone else's thoughts. You walk to the car. The engine starts. The radio clicks on. You sit at the desk. The white screen glares. The notifications ping. You walk into the grocery store. The fluorescent lights buzz. The overhead speakers hum with manufactured pop music. You are terrified of the quiet. We are a generation addicted to momentum. We run from the pause. If a conversation lulls for 5 seconds, panic sets in. If a room goes completely still, we pull a vibrating metal device from our pocket. We scroll. We swipe. We consume. We treat silence as a void. We treat it as a vacuum that must be violently filled with digital furniture. But silence is not. An empty space waiting for noise. It is a bronze scale waiting for a heavy stone. When you open up the book of Psalms today, you probably read it exactly like you scroll your morning feed. You skim the lines. You rush the stanzas. You look for the emotional, dopamine hit. You want the comfort of the resolution without doing the hard labor of the tension. You hit the word Selah at the end of a terrifying verse, and your eyes jump right over it. It feels like a glitch. It feels like a typo in the spiritual manual. You do not want to stop. You do not want to sit in the unresolved tension of the poem. Because if you stop, the anxiety. When modern believers read the Psalms aloud today, they simply skip right over it. They treat it like a typo. A piece of ancient debris catches up to your chest. If you stop, the grief you buried yesterday rises to the surface. If you stop, the heavy, uncomfortable questions about your own survival demand an answer. David stopped running on the mountain. Habakkuk stopped pacing on the watchtower. They let the violent silence wash over them. They lifted the fear up. They felt its exact physical weight. They did the brutal work of Selah. But you keep the noise running. You keep the mental engine revving. You refuse to cast up a highway in the wilderness of your own mind. You refuse the ambush. And because you refuse to pause, you miss the profound mechanical shift happening just beneath the surface of the ancient text. Because when a Hebrew poet commands you to weigh the terror, they are not doing it to torture you. They are preparing the scale. The bronze scale in an ancient marketplace only functions when it is engaged in friction. It demands a counterweight. When the Hebrew poets inserted the command to pause to Selah, they understood the spiritual mechanics of gravity. If you place the terrifying reality of an approaching army or the blinding fear of a cosmic judgment on the left side of the balance, the metal arm plunges downward. The iron chain pulls tight. The anxiety hits the table with a heavy, physical thud left on the page. A frustrating interruption to the real meat of the scripture. But if you look closer at the root verb buried in the dirt, but the silence of the Selah is not meant to leave the scale unbalanced in the dirt. It is the time required to reach into the dark and find the stone that goes on the other side. In the third psalm, David places the devastating accusation of his enemies onto the scale, forcing himself to sit in the cold dread of their words. He waits in the absolute quiet of the pause. And then, immediately after the Selah, the poetry resumes with a violent shift in momentum. But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. He places the immutable, historically proven character of God on the right side of the balance, and the bronze beam slowly levels out. Faith is not the denial of a heavy burden. It is the introduction of a heavier truth. The pause is the vital cognitive machinery that allows the human mind to transition from the paralysis of panic into the movement of praise. When modern readers skim past the command, they are trying to steal the comfort of David's shield without doing the agonizing labor of David's pause. We want the theological resolution, but we actively refuse the theological collision. We want the song to end in victory of the ancient Hebrew language, at the exact Terrifying moments. This word is triggered in the narrative. You start to see something the musical note theory completely misses, but we do not want to endure the suffocating silence required to get there. The Hebrew text refuses to let you cheat the system. The Levite choirs force the congregation of Israel to stand in the terrifying quiet of the temple courtyard, listening to the crackle of the altar fire, holding the tension of their own fragile existence in their hands. They had to weigh their political enemies. They had to weigh their own internal corruption. They had to weigh their desperate, aching need for mercy. You cannot genuinely praise a God who rescues you until you have fully weighed the terror of the thing that is trying to destroy you. Without the silence, the scale stays broken. Without the intentional, grinding halt of the Selah, the panic dictates the entire narrative of the song. The command to lift up the trouble is the only way a human being can realize that the trouble is not the heaviest object in the room. That ancient mechanism of weighing the dark already pointed forward. The echo of the bronze scale reverberates all the way down into the exact season you are surviving right now. A barefoot king fled up a mountain, weeping, and a terrifying accusation was placed on the scale. Selah is not a rest for the instruments. It is an ambush for the soul. The word is not asking for empty quiet. A temple choir silenced their stringed instruments in the smoke, and the survival of a fractured nation was weighed on the cold stones. A prophet watched the ancient hills shatter into dust, and the sheer, blinding holiness of God leveled the balance. A merchant lifted a rough-hewn stone in a dimly lit market, and the exact physical value of the currency was revealed. A beaten people cleared heavy debris from a dirt road, and a highway for the divine was cast up in the wasteland. A human mind stops rushing past the poetic tension, and the crushing weight of panic is finally accurately measured. A soul sits in the suffocating echo of their own despair, and the immutable, heavy shield of God rises up to protect them. Same command. Same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is David in the dirt. He is actively losing his kingdom. The assassins are marching up the jagged limestone. The fear is a physical weight on his chest. And instead of rushing to the triumphant end of the song to make himself feel better, he forces himself to stop. He demands the pause. He lets the silence hurt before he lets it heal. If you are in a season where you have been frantically running, it is demanding a specific, agonizing internal action from the person reading it. It forces a sudden collision between what was just said, from a heavy, uncomfortable reality, a failed expectation, a terrifying diagnosis, a quiet, lingering betrayal. The ancient text is giving you permission to stop. You do not have to blindly endure it. You do not have to fake the praise. You just have to put the terror on the bronze scale. Silence is not an empty void you need to fill with digital noise. It is the necessary machinery of your own rescue. It is the place where you lift up the lie to see how much it actually weighs. If this reached something in you, subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from trying to outrun their own anxiety. Pray for us as we keep digging into these ancient texts, and may the God who holds the universe together meet you in the terrifying quiet and prove to you that He is heavier than anything you are carrying and what is about to happen. And once you understand what that action is, it changes how you read every single psalm, every cry of lament, and every uncomfortable moment of silence in your own experience. To feel the physical weight of what was actually happening when those temple singers went quiet, you cannot start in the safety of the sanctuary. You have to start in the Judean wilderness, with a barefoot king running for his life, bleeding into the dirt, and carving a command into a song that he knew we would eventually want to ignore, and the sweet, stinging smoke of frankincense. A choir of Levite priests stands on the massive stone steps that curve upward toward the holy place. To understand how an ancient Hebrew mind approached this text, we have to strip away centuries of polite, leather-bound religious conditioning. We are used to opening the book of Psalms in a quiet room, sipping coffee, reading a few verses for morning comfort, and then moving on with the day. We treat the book like a treasury of inspirational quotes, something to soothe an anxious mind before a difficult meeting or a long commute. But that is a modern luxury. For the ancient Israelite, The Psalter was not a devotional. It was a survival manual. These 150 poems were forged in caves, on battlefields, in prison cells, and during forced death, marches into Babylonian exile. They are dripping with actual, historical blood, sweat, and political terror. And when these raw, chaotic cries of individual agony were brought into the structured, highly choreographed worship of the Jerusalem temple, something fascinating happened to the texts. They were meticulously preserved, word for hard-won word, copied onto thick, heavy animal skin scrolls by scribes who counted every single letter in black ink to ensure nothing was lost. And in the margins of these blood-stained survival songs, someone kept writing this three-letter Hebrew command: Samek, Lamd, Hey, Selah. Scholars have spent centuries arguing over its exact etymology, sifting through ancient lexicons and dead cognate languages to pinpoint the mechanical function of the word. They are holding lyres carved from cypress wood, their fingers calloused from decades of striking the thick strings. The lead cantor raises his hands. Some point to the Greek Septuagint, the translation made in the 3rd century BC, which renders Selah as diapsalma, meaning an interlude, a change in the musical rhythm, or a pause in the singing. Others dig into Assyrian root words, suggesting it means to lift up the voice, a crescendo where the bronze cymbals crash and the choir pushes their vocal cords to the breaking point. It is incredibly easy to get lost in the academic weeds here. We build massive theological arguments around musical theory, treating the word as if it belongs strictly to the ancient equivalent of a sound engineer. But focusing purely on the acoustics completely misses the architecture of the human soul that these texts were designed to map. When you look at where this word actually appears in the text, the musical notation, theory begins to crack under the emotional weight of the narrative. The word does not appear randomly. It does not show up at natural stanza breaks or at the end of a neat, resolved thought. It is almost always injected into the text at the precise moment of maximum tension, maximum doubt, or maximum revelation. It is an intentional disruption. Selah is not a musical rest. It is a theological collision. It is the moment the text reaches out, grabs the reader by the shoulders, and demands that they stop speaking, stop reading. A massive chorus of voices echoes across the courtyard, chanting an ancient poem of desperation, a plea for deliverance from violent enemies, and let the sheer weight of what was just said crush the breath out of their lungs. And the very first time this word appears in the biblical narrative, it is not written by a peaceful choir director, standing in a sunlit temple courtyard. It is written by a man who is actively losing everything he has ever loved. The king is running. The crown is gone. The palace is lost. The city is behind him. David climbs the steep slope of the Mount of Olives. He is weeping. His head is covered in mourning. His feet are completely bare. The dust of the Judean hills sticks to his tears. The sharp limestone cuts into his heels. His own flesh and blood has stolen the throne. Absalom, his son, is hunting him. An army is mobilizing in the valley below. The scouts are watching from the ridges. Assassins are sharpening their blades. Death is marching up the mountain. David is not sitting in a peaceful sanctuary. He is not leading a choir. He is hiding in the wilderness. His chest is heaving. His breathing is ragged. He is completely surrounded by men who want to put a spear through his chest. And here, in the dirt, he writes a song, Psalm Kolme. He cries out to the sky, Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of my soul. The sound vibrates in the chest of every worshiper standing on the cold paving stones. And then, without warning, the voices cut out. God will not deliver him. And then, the text halts. The ink stops. The voice cuts out. Selah. This is the very first time this word drops into the biblical record. Psalm, chapter 3, verse 2. It appears right after the worst possible accusation, right after his enemies declare that God has totally abandoned him. Look at the panic in the text. Look at the rapid-fire anxiety. David lists the threats. He names the betrayal. He feels the walls closing in. The fear is a physical weight on his chest. And then, a sudden, dead silence. This silence is not a musical transition. It is a gasp for air. It is a man stopping to check his own pulse. He is forced to sit in the terrifying echo of his enemy's words. God will not deliver him. He breathes in. He feels the cold wind of the mountain. He waits in the dark. The text demands a full, violent pause, right at the exact point of total despair, right when the anxiety is highest. But what is he supposed to do in that silence? What is the ancient reader supposed to do when they hit that wall? They are not just supposed to stop singing. They are supposed to perform a specific, intense internal action. To see what that action is, you have to dig beneath the Greek translation. You have to look at the three-letter Hebrew root buried beneath the command. The wooden stringed instruments go completely still. The silver trumpets are lowered. A sudden, heavy, almost suffocating silence drops over the entire mountain. The word written in the margins of David's terror is the Hebrew Selah. But beneath that specific command lies a foundational root verb that completely alters the landscape of the verse. The root is the Hebrew salal. It is an intensely physical, architectural word. It means to lift up, to build a mound, or to cast up a highway. In the ancient Near East, to lift a physical object was also the primary method used to weigh it. Picture an ancient merchant standing in a dimly lit market, placing a heavy, rough-hewn stone on one side of a bronze scale and lifting the apparatus by an iron center chain. To salal is to elevate an object into the air specifically to feel its true gravity. It is the mechanical process of determining exact value. If the idea that the biblical text is asking you to actively weigh your reality, rather than just blindly endure, it is stirring up questions you've never considered. You're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the ancient reader is handed the bronze scale. The root verb salal appears in the book of Isaiah, chapter 62. Verse 10, you can hear nothing but the wind and the crackle of the altar fire. It happens again in the next psalm. And the next, when the prophet commands the people to prepare for the arrival of the Lord, he says, build up the highway, clear away the stones. The verb used for building up that dirt road is salal. It is the hard, manual labor of lifting heavy debris out of the way so that something divine can actually get through the wilderness. That root changes everything. When David writes Selah right after his enemies declare that God has completely abandoned him, he is engaging in the brutal work of spiritual physics. He is stopping the song to lift up the accusation. He is holding the terrifying reality of Absalom's approaching army in one hand, and he is casting up a cognitive highway for the truth in the other. He has to feel the weight of the lie before he can discard it. Selah is not a command to empty your mind. It is a command to place your fear on the scale and weigh it against the presence of God. And this act of weighing is not just required in the personal, political terror of the Psalms. The command appears in an even more extreme environment, written by a prophet who is watching the fabric of reality tear open. The prophet Habakkuk stands on the watchtower. His eyes burn against the horizon. He is looking for an answer from the sky. 71 times in the longest book of the Bible, 3 times in the book of the prophet Habakkuk. The ancient musicians read down the parchment scroll, begging to know why Babylonian violence is tearing his nation apart. And the sky tears open. God begins to move. He comes from Teman. The Holy One approaches from the jagged crags of Mount Paran. His glory covers the heavens. The earth fills with a terrifying praise. His brightness is like the sunrise. Rays of brilliant, blinding light flash from his hands. Pestilence marches before his feet. Plague burns the ground in his wake. He stops. He measures the earth. He looks, and the nations tremble. The ancient mountains, unmovable for millennia, shatter into fine white dust. The age-old hills collapse under their own weight. And right here, in the middle of this cosmic arrival, Right as the sensory overload reaches an unbearable peak, the text halts. Selah. Habakkuk chapter Uch. Verse 3. This is the anomaly. This is the only place outside the book of Psalms where the command appears. In the ancient Hebrew texts, Habakkuk is not holding a lyre. He is not standing in a Levitical choir. He is standing in the blinding, deafening epicenter of a divine visitation. He is watching the tectonic plates of the earth buckle under the footstep of the Creator. The fear is not an approaching army of men with spears. The fear is the sheer, unapproachable holiness of God, tearing through the physical atmosphere. And the command drops like an iron anvil. Selah. The prophet is forced to stop speaking. His lips quiver. Decay enters his bones. His legs tremble beneath him. Their eyes hit 3 specific Hebrew letters. And everything violently halts. Same sudden silence. Same invisible boundary line drawn across the text. He has to lift this incomprehensible vision onto the bronze scale. He has to feel the absolute, knee-buckling terror of the Almighty. He has to weigh the majesty of the coming judgment against the political chaos of his own era. This pause is not a polite transition between prophetic stanzas. It is the sudden paralysis of a human mind colliding with the infinite. Weigh the shattered mountains. Weigh the blinding light. Weigh the burning ground. The text refuses to let him rush past the awe. The text demands that his nervous system absorb the shockwave of what he is actually seeing. He must salal. He must elevate the reality of God's terrible power until it completely outweighs his dread of the Babylonian Empire. He has to sit in the ruins of his own theology and let God be exactly who God is. But while an ancient prophet understood how to stand in that devastating, heavy, quiet, a modern reader approaches the text entirely differently. We have built an entire culture designed specifically to ensure we never have to endure that kind of silence. You wake up in the dark. Your hand reaches across the cold sheets for the nightstand. You pick up a glowing rectangle of glass. You press a piece of plastic into your ear. You flood your brain with noise, music, a podcast, the morning news,